So it's with great pleasure that I would like to introduce Taimi Allan, currently a Mental Health Commissioner for South Australia. And after nearly 2 decades in New Zealand leading organizations and championing lived experience leadership and designing innovative responses to mental health system gaps, and there's plenty, but what a job you had cut out for you, Taimi. You've recently returned from New Zealand to take the role of Mental Health Commissioner of South Australia. So we have Taimi here today to present on From Preaching to the Converted to Driving Real Change. Taimi.
And also congratulations on your PhD. My psychiatrist told me once that I wouldn't be able to work again either, and now I'm his boss.
Look at us.
Woo, woo, woo. Thank you. I'm going to start my clock because I tend to go off script a little bit, and I want to make sure that I leave room for the next. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much too to the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung nations of language groups of the Eastern Kulin nations for letting us stand and tread very lightly on their lands today. And I want to acknowledge anyone in the room, the traditional owners, where you come from, and your connection to land, spiritual culture, all the things that we are still learning after thousands of years of you doing it right. And for the New Zealanders in the room too, I know Simon's here. It's great to see you again, Simon. Kia ora te whānau, kua taimai nei ki te tautoko e tēnei kaupapa. It's really lovely to have you here. Thank you. So, how do I click? Oh, it's this. Yes, there you go. It's always the first thing, isn't it? How do you go forward? I also stand on the lands back home of the Kaurna people, and I know I've got some lovely Adelaide people here today. So thank you for coming and bringing the Kaurna energy with us. And I was at the reconciliation breakfast this morning, which is wonderful. I bring that energy with us today. So who's my mob? I've been introduced as someone with lived experience who has been in a dedicated lived experience role for over 20 years now. But prior to that, I didn't have a mental health qualification other than by experience. My qualifications were in drama and law and communications and all of those really amazing things. And actually that gives me a pretty new and interesting lens to the type of work that I do and have done for the last 20 years. But this is my current mob. And outside my work life, not only is my qualified by experience made me, I reckon, a better parent, probably a better wife and lover, just saying. I'm a performer still. I'm a glass blower on weekends. That's my meditation. I'm not very good at sitting still, but I am very good at sitting in front of something that will likely kill me if I don't concentrate. And I also distill my own gin, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. And the thing that drives me is social justice. And one of the questions that came up before, it was very close to me, is why can't we have more lived experience roles like this, and what does it take to come out of the closet in these spaces? I actually think if we don't have good human rights frameworks and good human rights laws, we can't come out of the closet because we will get discriminated against. So until we get that right, and without exclusions to those human rights, it's very hard to come out really proudly if you ever want to get back in the closet again. So I guess I'm out and I'll never get back in. So I did do a bit of these things you probably already know, and I'm not going to spend too much time on the preaching to the converted bit. We know that the reason why we as a community die earlier is that there's a lot of inequity. We know that our health systems have structural barriers. We know our workforce issues and the time we get to spend with people mean that diagnostic overshadowing is rife. I've put their exposure to commercial determinants. In equally well, we talk about exposure to risk factors, and actually say those risk factors are there intentionally because they make money for other people. And I think we need to talk not only about our social determinants, but our commercial determinants. Who else is lobbying governments for money? If our food industries are making us sicker, if our pharmaceutical industries are not looking after our well-being, then who's going to challenge those things if we don't? We know that both the benefits and faults of psychotropic medication and the side effects that come with those. We know socioeconomic status is a big thing, particularly in the current climate, and particularly with our Indigenous folk. We know that the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, are all things that contribute to us not being equally well. So today I thought I might concentrate just on one of those, and that is addressing the diagnostic overshadowing, which I think is probably the biggest problem we've got right now in our society. There are a lot of other things we can address, and those are what I call the antidotes. So we could probably do a presentation on each one of those antidotes for the equally well problems. But today I'm going to look at diagnostic overshadowing because just before I came here I thought I'd do a bit of a quick and dirty survey of South Australians to see just how many South Australians actually have these experiences. So as far as, if you've got academics in the room, not a great research study. It was very leading questions. I was looking for stories of diagnostic overshadowing. I wasn't necessarily looking for positive stories. But I wanted to start with my own overshadowing experiences to put a little bit of context in that. And I've had more than 4, but these were probably the 4 most diverse overshadowing experiences. So in my 20s, when I was pregnant, I was diagnosed with rapidly cycling bipolar. So I was going up and down and up and down and up and down a lot in the course of a year. And then when I was hospitalised after the birth of my son, 22 odd years ago, I was told that the reason that I was experiencing psychosis was obviously an extension of the things that I had gone through before. And a friend of mine said, "Have you had your thyroid checked?" And I said, "I don't even know what that is, but I'll go and ask my psychiatrist." And the psychiatrist, he said to me, "Okay, well, I'll check it, but if it is thyroid, I get total credit for this." He actually said those things, yeah. It was thyroid, and what I was going through that looked like rapidly cycling bipolar was called a thyroid storm. So as the thyroid sputters and dies, you get an influx of hormones and then no hormones, an influx of hormones, and so that kind of demonstrates or shows itself as moods going really high and really low. My second one, when I first arrived in New Zealand 20 plus years ago, I was working in the coffee industry. So I come from hospitality, and my job wasn't asked when I was put into my first experience of an inpatient unit in New Zealand and my last experience of an inpatient unit anywhere in the world. And the reason why it was probably really important to ask is I had gone in and everyone said, "Oh, she's got a history of bipolar," which, as we know, isn't an actual real history of bipolar at that point. She's really, really manic. But no one said to me, "What do you do as a job?" And what I was doing is I was travelling around the country teaching baristas how to make latte art for competitions, and I was drinking over 12 espressos a day. Kind of looks like mania. And it's actually in the DSM as caffeine intoxication, but not something that looked at. And amazingly, that after 2 weeks in an inpatient unit drinking nothing but international roast, which as a barista you don't touch with a bar of soap, my symptoms went away. Incredible, right? The third one was quite a few years after I was well and hadn't had an episode in a long time. I'm scared of the water, but I went swimming. I'm scared of things that touch you under the water. I mean, to be fair, I can scuba dive as long as I can see the shark coming. I'm fine, but if it touches my leg, I'm gone. So I was out swimming, and then I was so excited that I got back to my friend's house, and we'd had 1 glass of champagne, and I was sitting on the deck. They didn't have a barrier on the deck, and I remember I was on such a high from being excited that I'd broken one of my fears that I remember that I used to be a rock climber. And then I could lower myself off this deck with just the fingertips of my hands. And of course, I hadn't been a rock climber for a very long time, and my arms gave way and I fell on the concrete before and I broke my leg and I was taken into hospital. 2 things about that trip. One is, as soon as the ambulance officer knew that I had mental health, the conversation changed. But that was the moment I chose to move into mental health, because I got in that ambulance after many times of getting in an ambulance for other things relating to my mental health. The ambulance officer was kind The ambulance officer understood what I was going through, was managing my pain, was talking me through the whole time, and I thought, gosh, I've never had this experience before. Maybe I want to be an ambulance officer. Well, I didn't do that. But when I got to the hospital, they looked at my mental health history, of which addiction is one of the boxes that I used to tick, and they went, and they said, have you had anything to drink? And I said, yes, I had a glass of champagne. And so they wrote down, I had been drunk. I was drunk. Not that I fell off a balcony with no barriers, but that I was drunk. And guess who can't get life insurance now because of those words? And then the last one was relatively recently, a year or so ago. I was managing some chronic pain, and I kept going to all these doctors, and they kept putting me on anti-inflammatories, and they just said, look, you've just got a really stressful job. You need to go and get a massage. Anyway, I ended up, after many, many diagnoses, of me advocating for myself and going, this is not just normal pain. This is really tough. Being diagnosed with polymyalgia rheumatica, which is a condition that's usually not diagnosed until you're in your 70s, so it was early onset. But all of these things, it was all dedicated to what you read on the chart and then the assumptions that were made. And I'm a pretty stroppy person. I can advocate for myself, and these things still happen to me. One story I wanted to share with you, with permission from the family, is this true story. And is there anyone, put your hand up if you want me to read it out. Otherwise, I think it's quite powerful if I just put it on the screen. Anyone would like me to read it for vision reasons or whatever? Okay, I'll read it, okay. So I worked with a 26-year-old woman as a peer support worker about 20 years ago. Beautiful, young, Pacific woman who had a history of schizoaffective disorder, and with that she had a past history of delusions. She didn't have them at that current time, but that was part of her history, and that was known to everybody because she talked openly about it with her peers. She went into the doctor once and said, I think I'm pregnant. And so the doctor tested her for pregnancy and said, no, I'm sorry, hon, you're not pregnant. Tests come back negative. It's obviously your delusions again coming back. So we'll up your meds. We'll adjust your meds. Poor old Kelly found out she had a tumour the size of a basketball in her stomach 2 weeks before she died at 26. Her family let me tell you this story because stories are important, because stories change people's minds, they change people's attitudes, and most importantly, they change people's behaviour. This is a woman that looked like she was pregnant. She wasn't a large lady, wasn't hidden. She had a very distended stomach. Why wouldn't we check? Why wouldn't we? Very extreme example. But one of the things I did over the last couple of weeks is I just reached out to South Australians and said, do you have stories like this that you'd like to share with me and you'd like to share with you guys today? And was open for less than a week, and I got 140 responses. Now, I want to say there are many, many limitations of this survey, okay? I know through the clinicians that I work alongside of that there are really, really good clinicians out there that do check and do test and know about overshadowing and don't do it. But for 140 people in 1 week to tell me that this is still happening to them means that we still have a bit of an issue. I think when you peel, my job as a commissioner, when people say, what do you do? I go, I peel the layers off the onion. That's my job. So if there's a barrier, I go, well, what's underneath that and what's underneath that? So we know that some of the barriers for overshadowing aren't just because people are ignorant.